Hello and welcome to the HR Kyle podcast, the ultimate resource for HR insights and guidance that will empower both seasoned business professionals and eager job seekers. I'm HR Kyle, your host. I'm excited to embark on this journey with you. In each episode, we'll delve into the intricacies of HR management, uncovering strategies that can transform the way you approach talent acquisition, employee engagement, and workplace dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned HR pro navigating the ever-evolving landscape of human resources or a job seeker striving to land your dream position, this podcast is your compass. Our mission is simple: to provide you with actionable knowledge, expert interviews, and inspiring stories that will help you thrive in the world of HR. So, sit back, relax, and get ready to take your HR game to the next level. Welcome to the HR Kyle podcast, where HR meets success. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the HR Kyle podcast. I'm your host, Kyle, and I'm thrilled to have you join me today as we embark on a journey of personal and professional growth. On today's show, we have an incredible lineup that will leave you inspired and motivated. In segment one, we're going to talk about the qualities of an effective leader, getting into the specifics of what that means in a very practical sense. And in segment two, we have a special guest joining us talking about what it's like heading into the last few months before retirement and the lessons he's learned throughout his career. But before we get into this exciting episode, let's take a moment for this short break. Are you a business owner looking to build a thriving team? Or perhaps a job seeker on a quest for your dream career? Look no further than HR Kyle. HR Kyle is your trusted partner for all things human resources. We're not just about services, we're about success. For businesses, HR Kyle offers tailored HR solutions from talent acquisition to compliance support. We're here to help your team flourish. And for the job seekers, HR Kyle provides personalized career guidance and direction that only a seasoned HR professional can offer. We'll help you find that perfect job match. Don't settle for less. Choose HR Kyle and unlock success today. Visit us at www.hrkyle.com. HR Kyle, unlocking potential, empowering careers, transforming business. Welcome back to the HR Kyle podcast. In our first segment today, we're going to be exploring the qualities of an effective leader. Remember, leadership is not just about a title. It's about influence, inspiration, and making a positive impact on those around you. We'll discuss the essential traits that every successful leader possesses and how you can develop these qualities within yourself. Get ready to unlock your leadership potential. And as I say with each segment one, we'll move through this rather quickly. 2 points to that. One, have your papers and pencil ready to take notes. And number two, if any of this goes too quickly or if I'm not able to get in as much depth as you'd like, there's one simple solution. Reach out to me through hrkyle.com and I'm happy to talk with you more. So, being an effective leader, I always say with any presentation, with any meeting, always have your reason why. So here's my why here. Why this title? So being. Being implies that you're making a conscious effort every day, which as a leader, you need to do that. Number two, effective. So being an effective leader, that means you're focusing on results rather than just actions. We talk about that all the time. We talk about leadership. Ultimately, it's about the results that you deliver. And finally, leader. As I introduced this segment, I explained to you what a leader is. In case you haven't noticed, there's a big difference between a leader and a boss. For me, a boss is a title. A leader, that's a feeling that you conjure up in others. So let's talk further about the whys. 30% of employees are actively considering a job change. Okay, so file that number away. But how many of you have heard the quote, people do not leave bad companies, they leave bad bosses? In fact, a recent Gallup poll found 75% of employees who left a company left because of their boss, not because of the job they held. Okay, bosses, are you listening? This is why we're having this conversation today. Your role in how you perform as a leader is critically important to your company. In other words, you make a big difference. So, the qualities of an effective leader. Let's go through these. I'll give you the list first, and then we'll go through these again at a pretty quick pace. So get your notes ready. 1, communicates a clear vision. 2, sets performance expectations. 3, provides feedback. 4, they're supportive. 5, recognizes efforts. 6, gets to know their employees. 7, and this is one that's important to me, makes work fun. We always look past that when we talk about leadership, and it's so critical. They're decisive. The next one is available for employees. That means physically, emotionally, and mentally available. And finally, they share credit with their staff. Now, again, that's not a list I made up. That's based upon years of experience working in organizations and understanding what motivates people to be successful in groups. That's where that list came from. So number 1, communicates a clear vision. So you as leader need to ask yourself these questions. And once you have the answer, you need to be able to convey this to your team. Why does your department or goal or group exist? How does your department or group contribute to the company mission? What is your output and who uses it? What does success look like? You need to know that at a department level, and you certainly need to know it at an employee level as well. Where is the department now? Where do you need it to be? And most importantly, how do you get it there? What skills are important? And what are team skills currently? So what's your current status and what do you need it to be? And where does each person fit in? And then finally, when you answer these questions, like I just started, please let your team know. I have a quote. People are more likely to take a trip with you if they know where they're going, right? You as leader, you're taking them on a trip. Let them know where they're going. Next quality of an effective leader, they set performance expectations. And keep in mind, these points you're going to notice kind of relate to each other. So we talked about communicating a clear vision. We talked about where everybody fits in. Now you're setting performance expectations. You're setting goals with the employee. Remember, we've talked to each episode when we've talked about leadership, we've talked about employee engagement, having your employees involved in these processes. They're more likely to buy into something they're involved in. Find out and share with your employees what are their priorities, daily, weekly, monthly, etc. And you should know these. You really should know these. Spell out what you need. Be specific. Do not talk in general terms when you're talking about performance expectations. You as leader, you need to set the standard of quality. You set it by example, and you set it by what you share with your employees as far as the expectations. And then finally, you as leader, you have to have defined in your mind what does at expected, exceeds expectations, and below expected look like. Because for one, that allows you to measure. 2, it allows you to convey those thoughts to your employee group. Here's a startling stat for you. That was tough to say, but it's going to even be more tougher to digest. Recent poll found only 50% of employees know what's expected of them. So 50% of employees have no idea what I just spoke about there. Who's to blame for that? You as leader. Make sure your employees know what is expected. Next key quality of an effective leader, they provide feedback. We talk about feedback a lot on this podcast, so this one shouldn't surprise you. So here's what feedback is. It's how someone is doing in their effort to reach a particular set of goals. See how that ties into the first 2. Create a safe environment to give and receive feedback. We're going to talk about that more. But feedback has to be delivered privately, not public. And remember this, your goal with providing feedback, whether it's confirming or correcting, and you should know what those definitions are if you've listened to past episodes, your goal is to improve performance. That's it. It's not to punish. It's not to make yourself feel good, bad, or otherwise. It's to improve performance. The feedback has to be effective. So how do you accomplish that? It's specific and job behavior based. Again, we don't care about personality unless personality is a part of their job. You make it timely because we as humans, we want to have that relationship of when this happened, and it needs to be very close to when we receive the feedback to make the connection. It needs to be transparent. Please make sure your employees know what their expectations are and that you're clear in giving them feedback. Don't hold anything back. And then finally, it's got to be tangible. What does tangible mean? Make sure it's concrete, that it makes sense, and it's actually usable. And again, your goal is to improve performance. I always say there's really 3 types of feedback as it relates to the content. Okay, there's 2 types as it relates to what you're looking to accomplish. You're either affirming or you're correcting. But the content falls into 3 areas. You're either expressing appreciation, you're coaching, or you're evaluating. And in case you didn't notice, the first letter of each one of those is ACE, meaning ACE. Again, another quote that I use a lot is the only way to ace feedback is by using ACE, ACE, providing employees appreciation, coaching, and evaluation. If you're too heavy in one area, you're not going to achieve your desired results. Next quality of an effective leader, they're supportive. Ask yourself this as leader. Do you want the employee to succeed? And before you shake your head and say, oh my God, absolutely, I can't believe you asked that question. I've worked with more than a couple of supervisors that I was fully convinced they did not want the employee to succeed. They ultimately wanted the employee to fail so they could let them go, move them to another department. Again, I don't know what the motivation was, but clearly they did not have the best interest of the employee in mind. So if you're going to be supportive, you've got to start with the idea that you want that person to succeed. Next question, does the employee believe you want them to succeed? Do they have that impression of you and the relationship they have with you that they believe you want them to be successful? Because if they don't, these other points are moot. They are not going to listen. They're not going to be committed to what you're sharing, and they're not going to be too trusting of what you're having to offer, good, bad, or otherwise. You have to have an open door, guys. You hear that concept all the time. I've done so many employee manuals, and every time you've got an open door policy here. But I always make a point of telling managers what that means. It doesn't just mean having the door open from a literal sense. It means you're accessible physically, emotionally, and cognitively. And we know what that means. The employee comes to see you. Are you focused on what they're sharing? Are you there to be there for them? Are you listening? Are you practicing all those active listening techniques that we talk about? Okay, that's being accessible. Do you listen to understand, or do you listen to respond? And the funny example I give here is more and more in cities, you're seeing roundabouts as opposed to 4-way stops or what have you. And you got to ask yourself when you're listening, are you sitting at the roundabout waiting for the next gap in traffic to jump in? Because if you're not listening to understand, you're listening to respond, and you're that person that's at the roundabout waiting to jump into traffic the first chance they get. Listen to understand. That's being supported. Demonstrate empathy. Notice I didn't say sympathy, because there's a big difference between sympathy and empathy. Empathy says I understand. I can relate to what you're saying. And you're factoring that into how you work with that person. You're not giving them a free pass. You're simply incorporating your understanding of their circumstance into what you're sharing with the end result of success, improvement, whatever that goal is. And gosh, please demonstrate dignity. I can't believe I have to put that on there, but I do. That's in your behaviors towards that person, keeping those conversations confidential. Be sure you're coming from a good place. Again, your goal is for that person to be better. Remember this too. Being supportive is about the employee, not you. I always joke about the boss. Whenever you went to him, there's a particular boss that I'm thinking of here. Whenever you went to him with a concern, a question, or an issue, he always managed to relate it back to himself. And my joke was, one time a female employee went to him and she said, gosh, I'm pregnant. I'm going to need to take some time off. And he started off by saying, you know what? I remember that time I was pregnant. That's not supportive. Okay. It's not always about you, supervisor. It is about them. Make sure when you're being supportive, when you're talking with your employee, that they leave with something, whether it's your guidance or direction, some coaching, maybe it's confirmation. Hey, Jane, what you've shared with me here, thank you for sharing that. You're on the right path. I like what I'm hearing from you. And make sure that person leaves with a clear head. If they're talking to you and you've shared something, you've had a conversation, you need them to be focused, leaving that meeting on what you shared. If they're still distracted by something, you've missed the point. Supportive work environments. Okay, here's another stat for you. 59% more likely to having and retaining engaged employees. Remember, that's what we want, engaged employees. So supportive environments, they have that the majority of the time. Another key to being an effective leader, get to know your employees. Of course, know them professionally. And gosh, I say of course, and then I know plenty of bosses that have no idea of their employees' work history. They don't know the history. They don't know their experience. They don't know how best to lead that person. They don't know that person's work style. They don't know that person. Make sure that you do. You'd be surprised at the talent you may already have in your group that you're leaving untapped. Know that person personally. Think about the last episode that we talked about managing or of supporting your employees through their mental health. There's no separating our professional and personal selves. That person that's sitting in front of you is a full person, professionally and personally. They're bringing all that with them. Understand who they are as a person, the challenges that they have, the issues that they might have at home and in their personal life, or just understanding who they are. Make a connection. Employees really expect that from their bosses. I've worked with very few employees that I didn't see this characteristic, that they wanted to have some level of a connection with their boss. Work to do that. Figure out how you can relate to that person and how you can interact with them. But by God, be genuine. Be you. Don't try to be something you're not, something you've read in a leadership book or somebody that was your boss and you thought that was great how they interacted with people. That may not work for you. Be yourself. Here's what getting to know your employees does. It informs you on how you can support them. It helps you understand what their strengths are and how you can use them. So it's still results driven. That's what we're after. Keep this in mind. Employees that say their boss knows them, right? So they have some sort of relationship with this boss. 33% more likely to stay if their strengths are being used. 33%. So imagine cutting your turnover by 33%. How much does that save you in real dollars? Here's another one. I always put a premium on this because so many bosses lose track of this, but we can't and we shouldn't. Makes work fun. No one ever said, you're going to love this. I love this quote. No one ever said, I want a dry, boring work environment. I've yet to meet that person. Make the work environment fun. You don't have to sacrifice productivity and morale and so on. In fact, making the workplace fun ups morale, which we know leads directly to greater productivity, less safety issues, et cetera, et cetera. Ask yourself, what things does everyone connect on? How do you do that? You do what I said in the previous slide. Get to know your employees. Here's what making work fun does for you. Survey data here. This isn't me making this up. 31% more likely to stay at the company. 10 to 20% more productive. 90% highly engaged on a fun team. More creative. Less stress. In fact, 45% reduction in stress hormone cortisol. That's a measure of stress, cortisol, in your bloodstream. Reduces absenteeism by 37%. Remember I mentioned safety a minute ago? Reduces accidents because people are more alert and they're more engaged. Yeah, no one moving fast. Next key quality, be decisive. No one likes someone who's indecisive. Here's what indecisive tells your employees. Self-doubt, lack of confidence, incapable or inexperienced. Work on being decisive. Next point, shares credit. How many of us have worked with a boss that every time something went well, it was that person that did it all? No, that's not how it works. You don't endear yourself to your employees by taking all the credit. Give credit where credit is due. Public or private, I always put that down too because some employees don't like public recognition. I've had a couple of them in my time. They prefer to be recognized in private or not much at all. So know your employee. Sounds like one of our slides that we had a minute ago. Here's what sharing credit does. Again, research data on this, guys. Promotes fairness, honesty, and trust. Encourages desired behaviors. Wow, imagine that. I got praise for doing something well. I think I might do it again. Encourages top performance. Discourages hoarding of knowledge and information. God, this is a huge one. So many successful workplaces are derailed because one person hoards the knowledge. Recognize people that share their knowledge and their expertise with other team members. Here's the other thing. Shows your self-confidence as leader and builds self-confidence in the team. You giving that credit shows how confident you are. Remember this, leader, and this is a hard one to get through sometimes. As a leader, your performance is judged by how your team does. You heard me right. If you've got an all-star team that gets recognized all the time for individual performance, that says a lot about you as a leader. Here's one more piece of data for you on recognition. It increases engagement by 270%. Giving that recognition where it's due, the way that employees like it, increases engagement by that much. And remember, that's what we want. We want engaged employees. So finally, we talked about why this topic's important, why each of you is important. We went through, and I know it was quick, but that's the intention, the qualities of an effective leader. We also hit on the fact that this is a full-time job. This isn't a put this on your calendar and maybe I'll get around to it type of thing. This is something you're doing every minute that you're at work and afterwards. Okay. It's results focused. Again, let's not mistake action for results. We want results. And the final point, and I hope this is why you're listening, everyone listening to this wants to be a leader. We don't just want to be a boss. Remember, the boss is the title, the leader is the impact. So to wrap up this segment, think about the one thing, if there's just one thing that you can take away from this discussion today that's going to make you a better leader. Write that down so you remember it. Otherwise, that wraps up our first segment on the qualities of an effective leader. We've explored the essential traits that every successful leader possesses and how you can develop these qualities within yourself. But before we continue, let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. Stay tuned, though, because we have more great content coming up on the HR Kyle podcast.
Are you a business owner looking to build a thriving team? Or perhaps a job seeker on a quest for your dream career? Look no further than HR Kyle. HR Kyle is your trusted partner for all things human resources. We're not just about services, we're about success. For businesses, HR Kyle offers tailored HR solutions from talent acquisition to compliance support. We're here to help your team flourish. And for the job seekers, HR Kyle provides personalized career guidance and direction that only a seasoned HR professional can offer. We'll help you find that perfect job match. Don't settle for less. Choose HR Kyle and unlock success today. Visit us at www.hrkyle.com. HR Kyle, unlocking potential, empowering careers, transforming business.
And we're back. You're listening to the HR Kyle podcast, and I'm your host, Kyle. In our next segment, we have a very special guest joining us today. His name is Jeff. He's a seasoned professional who's heading towards retirement after a very successful career with a great deal of success. Get ready to hear his invaluable lessons learned, insights, and wisdom that will undoubtedly leave a lasting impression on your own journey. Jeff, welcome to the HR Kyle podcast.
Well, thank you, Kyle. Glad to be here.
No, we're glad to have you. Appreciate you joining us today. Jeff, let's kick off the segment today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Kyle, I've been mainly in industrial business management for 46 years now. I'm married. My wife and I raised 4 boys. One of them is a foster child that we adopted when we were foster parents for 6 years after our boys all moved out. We now have 11 grandchildren who keep us busy and smiling all the time. Professionally, I've enjoyed 3 tenures at 3 different companies of 10 plus years. And I'm currently in year 19 at my current job.
That's wonderful, Jeff. Again, thank you for joining us, and I appreciate the introduction. I think your work as a foster parent, too, speaks to who you are as a person and your desire to contribute. So appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
Jeff, you've spent, and you alluded to this a moment ago, you spent the last 20 plus years of your career in operations roles, but you actually got your start in what was known back then as personnel. Tell us a little bit about your career journey. You mentioned 46 years, but give us a feel for what that looked like.
Well, let's go back to the late 70s. Being 64 years old now, I've got out of high school in 77, had high school honors, good grades, and I went straight to work, did not go to college. A decision that I regretted later, but we'll get to that point in my career eventually. And I started at a factory in my hometown as a clerk. I applied for the job. It was a factory type setting. My dad was very happy about that because that's how my dad was raised in his working career. Factory jobs, industrial jobs. I was hired as a clerk. I was in that job about a year. And at some point, as you call it, the personnel director went on leave. She was gone. And based on my performance in 1 year at this clerk job, they asked me to fill in. Now, this is a small company. It had 100 to 150 employees. But they asked, would you take over the role personnel manager until this lady came back from leave? And I said, sure. Saying sure was one of the things that has gotten me forward in my career, saying yes to opportunity. So I took that job. I didn't know. I knew what I was supposed to do. They told me what I should be doing, and I did it. Should I have said yes to an opportunity at a job that I had zero experience? I thought so. And that's proven me right through the years when I've said yes, because what it takes and what it took then was just a little common sense. After that stint in personnel, I was moved into a management position in the warehouse. And shortly after that, we moved into a computerized system in the 80s when things started taking off with computers, and became logistics manager and got to work on a project. It all started with saying yes to an opportunity. Then I left for another job because it was money related. I'd been at this first job in my career for 10, almost 11 years, but I wanted to get paid for what I was doing and what I knew. So I took another job for money. That job lasted about a year and a half because the economy went bad in the 80s and I had to find another job. But you know what I did? I thought, you know what? I'm laid off. I could stay home and do something. I could find a job, but jobs were thin back then. Unemployment was very high in the U.S. So I said, you know what? I've got time on my hands. Now's the time to go back to college. So I said yes, and my wife was always supportive of these ventures that I had and this idea of going to college. So I finally started taking classes and going to college. And within 9 months, I obtained some credits in college, but I also found another job. Again, a clerk. Now, after having been a manager for, almost 9 years, taking a clerk job, to some people, it may have been, no, I don't want to start back at the bottom, but I said yes to this opportunity. I needed a job. It seemed like an opportunity to me just to have a job and have an income. And it was in the same town as where I was going to college. So it just seemed convenient. It also seemed like the right thing to do. So I started as a clerk at this company. Within a year, another opportunity arose. Evidently, the job I was doing as a clerk was noticed by people, just like it was when I was at the first job I had. And I was asked to fill in for someone because they were going to release somebody in the warehouse. They said, Jeff, do you think you could fill in for him until we find somebody else? And I said, well, I hope you don't find anyone else. And yes, I will accept this. Within 3 months, they said, Jeff, you're doing a good enough job. This job is yours. And I stayed there for 13 years in a variety of warehouse and logistics, again, industrial business management roles. But I was laid off. So you can see the ups and downs of my career so far, opportunities, but also setbacks. Then I had an opportunity to work outside of my comfort zone. I worked for a mortgage company, and again, I had zero knowledge and experience in that business. I really didn't understand it. I spent 2 years in that business and understood it well enough to make a little bit of impression, but it wasn't for me. Sales were not for me, but I kept my eyes open. Eventually, another warehouse manager job became available at a factory facility in where I was living. I accepted it. That's the job I'm currently in. I've been there 19 plus years. Again, opportunity arose and I said yes. That's been the story of my career, Kyle. It's not an embellishment when I say I've had opportunities and I've said yes to it. Now, perhaps it's not wise to say yes to every opportunity because it is an unknown. Where's this going to lead? What's going to happen? Am I really good enough for this? All those doubts might creep in, but I said yes. And there's reasons why I said yes, and I'll cover that here at the end of my discussion with you.
No, Jeff, great story. And you hit on so many points that I talk about with not only my listeners each week, but also employees and job candidates and so on that I work with as part of my career. And a couple of things absolutely stand out. One, your career path, like so many successful professionals, was by no means linear. I mean, there were a lot of twists and turns there. The other thing that you hit on, and I especially talk with young professionals about this, is this idea that you have to be able to bounce back from setbacks because they happen. They're inevitably going to happen.
Yes.
And again, you had 46 years worth of data there. You had a couple of setbacks, but you bounced back from it. And then finally, the other point, and you've had it hit on about saying yes, but something that I know about your work history is you put yourself in position for those opportunities to present themselves. They didn't just naturally. You proved your worth and you were willing to do whatever it took. People recognized that, and then those opportunities presented themselves.
People think sometimes they're in a lower position. For example, I was a clerk, started as a clerk in 2 different companies. And as a clerk, it's easy for management or other people to say, well, give it to him. We don't have time for it. Give it to him. I was hungry for that. I learned so much by people giving me what they thought was the shaft, perhaps, this extra work. And now I understood a different piece of the business. I was hungry for that. So many times in my job, I can remember instances where I would just sit there working, but also listening to these other things going on, other topics of interest to me that were related to jobs in that specific area. And I thought, this is something for me to pick up on and to learn. Don't feel like you're in a job where you get walked on, you get all the crap jobs. I took it as these jobs, I'm learning something. And I seemed to have a proficiency for getting them done. And guess what? People notice that you get things done then. Eventually, those crap jobs turn to, well, let's give it to Jeff, see what he can do with it. Maybe he can get this done. No, I'm not. I don't want this to sound like an advertisement for me as the perfect employee. I'm just telling you and your listeners, these are opportunities. It's all about your attitude and how you approach work.
Jeff, I've used the quote a couple of times, a couple of episodes, and I mean it wholeheartedly. Your attitude determines your altitude. And where I especially talk to young professionals about is sometimes those lower assignments is our way as an employer to say, let's see what their work approach looks like. It's almost a test. And as you said, hey, wow, he's good at doing that. Okay, let's up the ante a little bit. It's our safe way of testing you on something to say, do you have the work ethic? Do you seem to have the skills to do this? And hey, if you do, okay, we can take greater risk. Well, Jeff, you've made no secret that you're in retirement countdown mode. But here's the thing. You were recently recognized by your employer, and they're an international manufacturing company. We didn't talk about that, but Jeff's employer is an international manufacturing company, so they've got locations throughout the world. But Jeff was recognized internationally as one of the company's top performers. Now that throws our listeners a little bit of a curve because most people, they're just not that motivated when they're in countdown. What motivates you to still overperform?
Well, I was fortunate, and maybe not all of your listeners are as fortunate as I was and my brothers and I were, that we had parents who not only expected us to succeed, but to exceed. It wasn't just enough to get it done, but get it done right and be the very best at what you're doing. I'm one of 5 brothers. As I showed proficiency as a young boy, my mother, and of course my father too, began to see that average was not okay for me. At least that's how I took it.
Yeah.
And I think I was right, that good was not good enough, that excellence was required, and excellence could be expected out of me. It wasn't a false promise to expect that out of me. When I took this first job, when I was just a clerk, and I think I've maintained this throughout my career, these last 46 years, and whatever I was doing, I always had a career in mind. So as I've gotten to the end of my career, sometimes you get recognition for just being around, the old gold watch when you retire. But I've always had this mindset that I want to do a good job. And notice that I didn't say I want to get recognized. I want people to know that I'm doing a good job. This is about me. As I said at the awards presentation, we had a lot of executives come in a few weeks ago when this was presented to me and another gentleman at our company. I just want to do a good job. There's a pride in doing a good job. My presenter was one of the executive vice presidents of our company. And he said, the thing about Jeff, he has the 3 C's. And this is a typical pillar within our company now. The 3 C's are character, competence, and commitment. And he said, Jeff maintains the 3 C's of success. Having the character to do the job right, to be respected in what he does, to have the competence. You can be a good guy, but if you don't know what you're doing, you don't have the competence to perform a job, you're not getting anywhere. There's a lot of 25-year veterans that still can't do a very good job. And commitment. Commitment is one of the biggest points, and I'll talk about that as we wrap up. But commitment to what you're doing. So as I get older, I've probably honed those skills, but it's not an overnight success in my job. I feel like I've worked hard to develop these skills, and I was as surprised as anybody that I received this award because, again, I wasn't working toward that. It's not like I was, pitching great games and was hoping to win the Cy Young. I was just going out every 4 days and pitching, that's my mentality. I go into work, not that I go to work every 4 days, but that I go into work every day thinking I have such a pride, and maybe within pride, there's a little fear.
Mm-hmm.
The pride of doing a good job and maybe fear of failure. I want to do a good job. And if along the way I get recognized, that's great.
Jeff, it sounds like you're in a really great place, and just the lessons you've shared. There's not much I can add to what you've shared because you've provided so much wisdom in those statements. I just hope that my listeners turned up the volume and could really hear everything you shared there, because there's a lot of lessons that you are sitting on that can be valuable to anyone regardless of where they are in their career. They could be the 18-year-old that you described, or they could be close to where you are in their career progression. The messages and the lessons remain the same. So that leads very well into my final question, Jeff. As you look back on your career, what lessons would you pass along to a younger professional hoping to reach this point where you are? And when I mean this point, a legacy of accomplishments and admiration from your peers. What are your lessons?
Kyle, I've had ups and downs, but at the end as I come to the end of my career, I look back and didn't always make the right decisions, but I carried on. I kept going back to work if they let me. And here I am being able to look back on this career and share it with you and your listeners. And there's a pride of how I've done my job. I'm the most critical person to myself of anybody. That's how I am. I know when I've messed up, but right now I'd like to think that I've done an okay job.
Jeff, a wealth of knowledge there. You've been able to condense 46 years of experiences and lessons learned into really what amounts to a pretty short segment. And I hope our listeners again, had the volume turned up and could really soak all of that in. Can tell some of the lessons were a little bit hard learned, but you're better on the other side. And there's no doubt about it. You're ending on a very high note, and you certainly have a tremendous legacy behind you.
Thank you, Kyle.
Well, folks, that concludes our second segment with our special guest, Jeff. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Jeff for sharing his valuable insights and experiences with us. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show today.
Thank you, Kyle. You do a great job with these podcasts.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate sharing that. Well, folks, before we wrap up today's show, I want to express my gratitude to all of our listeners. Your support and engagement mean the world to me. We hope that you've gained some valuable knowledge and inspiration from today's episode. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, please reach out to me at hrkyle.com. I love hearing from you. Thank you again for joining us on the HR Podcast. Stay tuned for more insightful and empowering episodes. And until next time, take care and keep striving for greatness.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of the HR Kyle Podcast. We hope you found our discussion valuable and filled with insights that you can apply in your professional journey. Whether you're a business leader aiming to foster a thriving workplace or a job seeker looking to carve out your own path, remember that HR Kyle is the compass that can guide you towards success. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share it with your network. We're committed to being your trusted source for HR wisdom, and we look forward to having you back with us for our next episode. Remember, in the world of HR and professional growth, there's always room for progress. Be sure to visit our website at hrkyle.com. That's hrkyle.com to learn more about how we can help you meet your business and professional goals. So until next time, this is HR Kyle signing off. Stay motivated, stay informed, keep reaching for those career goals. Music provided by bensound.com. That's bensound.com.